Hey, everyone, cars, it's gonna be this is solely based on this. But if it's like, come on, you're doing it's just like this, so yes, we should work on my life. When we are going to get started, to the 4 minutes, just to let everyone know in the room as well as online. So thank you, and we'll get started in 2 minutes. It's year 23 there. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, folks in the room and online. I would like to start with an audio check. So first, how do I sound in the room? Okay.
Sound fabulous.
Awesome. And how do I sound online? I don't know if we can have folks type in the chat if they're able to hear me okay. There's an echo. Got it. Oh, that's weird. Okay, so test number 2 for online. How is that coming through? Better? Okay. We'll continue to monitor the audio quality and make adjustments if needed. But I would just like to start by introducing myself for those who I have not met before. My name is Brittany Driller. I am the Associate Deputy Director of Transportation Planning at the California Transportation Commission. And you've joined us because today we're hosting our first workshop for the California Transportation Plan Guidelines and the Regional Transportation Plan Guidelines update.
Yes.
Before I hand it over to Executive Director Mitch Weiss, I'd like to mention a couple of logistical things for folks in the room. First, our staff is going to be taking a few photos today. So if you do not want your photo taken, please let me know. We are hoping to use some photos from today in future materials for CTC and California documents. I would also like to mention that if you would like to connect to the Wi-Fi, I've been successful on the Allenby DDS guest network. You just put in your email and accept their terms. There's another guest network for the Allenby building that others have logged into. If you have any issues with that, please let me or one of our staff sitting up here know. If you use the restrooms at any point, those are right out the door. You go just past the security table, take a right, and go down the hallway. Next, I'll turn it over to Terry Zamora to provide information for those joining via webinar.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the CTP Guidelines and RTP Guidelines Update Workshop. For participants joining us through the webinar, please acquaint yourself with the WebEx interface. On the right-hand side of the screen, you will find your name under Participants. You may also find audio and video settings options using the menu at the top left. If you would like to download the meeting packet, including agenda and slides, you may find this at the CTC Workshops page. I will also include the link in the chat. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link to access the webinar. These cannot be shared with other participants as they are registered to each specific attendee. There are two options for you to provide comments or feedback. So for the morning session, we are going to work on the tech a little bit, and we'll offer the raise hand feature in the afternoon session. But for the morning session, please plan to voice your remarks or comments through the chat. And so for the raise hand feature, you can do that by clicking on the hand icon next to your name on the right-hand side of the screen or at the bottom center of your screen. This will indicate to us that you wish to speak. At the appropriate time, CTC staff may unmute you so that you can provide your comment. You will be asked to unmute yourself. We ask that you state your name and affiliation prior to voicing your remarks. The other option is to use the chat feature. You may find the chat box at the lower right-hand side of your screen. At the appropriate time, CTC staff may read the comment on your behalf. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you sharing your time and feedback with us.
All right. So next, I'll turn it over to Mitch Weiss, Executive Director of the California Transportation Commission, to provide opening remarks.
Thank you, Bridget. I appreciate you giving me this time on the agenda, so I would feel like I add value to something, but I'm really not adding value here. You guys here are all the experts. I just want to welcome you here and thank you for attending this workshop. The purpose of the workshop today is to provide an update on the guideline process, to cover what we've heard in the technical work so far, and to continue hearing from you about important issues you hope to see included in the guidelines. Many of you know the Commission as an agency that funds transportation projects, but what's not always apparent is that these projects are successful because of robust regional planning and engagement efforts. Our goal through this guidelines update is to continue supporting long-range planning efforts that further achievement of state, regional, and local goals. I want to thank our team of Commission Caltrans staff for their work to make today's workshop a success, particularly Caltrans staff from the Transportation Planning Division who are leading the work groups. We appreciate their subject matter expertise and look forward to incorporating ideas from the work groups in the coming months. We also appreciate those who are participating in the process. This includes federal, state, regional planning agencies, metropolitan planning organizations, local government partners, tribal governments, non-governmental partners, and the general public. We cannot do this work without all of you participating. I encourage you to reach out to our team if you have any questions or input. And with that, I'll turn it back to Bridget for the real world.
Thank you, Mitch. So for our next item, I'll provide an overview of what we've been working on to date and what we plan to cover at today's workshop. So as you may already know, the Commission maintains guidelines for several types of long-range planning documents. We've initiated an update to the guidelines that are shown here on the slide, which includes the California Transportation Plan or CTP guidelines, the Regional Transportation Plan or RTP guidelines, and there are two versions of the RTP guidelines. One is for metropolitan planning organizations, which represent our state's more urban counties, and the regional transportation planning agencies, which represent our state's rural counties. The guidelines were last adopted by the Commission in 2017, and we announced at our October 2022 Commission meeting that we began updating both sets of guidelines, working in close collaboration with Caltrans staff. As you may be aware, a lot has happened in transportation planning since 2017. We have new legislation at both the state and federal level, new plans for reports, and best planning practices that have evolved over the last 5 years. And so we look forward to incorporating that into the updated guidelines. I'd like to recap what we've accomplished so far in the guidelines update process. So on October 27th, we held a virtual kickoff meeting to provide an overview of the guidelines update and hear from stakeholders. I know that we have some repeat attendees from that kickoff meeting, so welcome back and thanks for being engaged. That meeting featured presentations from diverse partners, including representatives from federal and state agencies, regional transportation planning agencies, as well as a nonprofit organization. And following that meeting, Commission staff and Caltrans staff, we've really turned our attention to updating those draft documents and figuring out what language we would like to change as a baseline. I would like to share, if you've not already heard, that a discussion draft of the California Transportation Plan guidelines was shared with stakeholders earlier this month, and it's also posted on the Commission's Transportation Planning webpage. You'll hear a presentation this morning from Francis Diaz-Sanchez, the California Transportation Plan Program Manager, on what is included in that discussion draft. As Mitch mentioned, I'd like to repeat that Caltrans has formed technical work groups to allow partners to provide input throughout the update process for both sets of guidelines. The technical work groups held their first meeting last week, and we look forward to sharing more about what we've heard at those meetings later in this workshop. Before I move on to the next item on our agenda, I would like to pause to see if there's any initial questions or comments. And I'll first ask in the room if there are any questions or comments. Okay, I'm not seeing any in the room. Do we have any online? Okay. Sounds good. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Francis Diaz-Sanchez, the CTP Program Manager, to provide an update on the 2023 CTP Guidelines discussion draft.
Hello. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Francis Diaz-Sanchez. I am the CTP Program Manager in the Office of State Planning, Equity, and Engagement. I oversee a suite of products related to the development of the CTP. And today I'll be providing a very brief overview on our 2023 CTP Guidelines update, as Bridget had mentioned. Yes. So briefly, what I'll go over are the CTP guidelines timeline, the actual guidelines update, some of the key changes that we have in the CTP guidelines this year, and some of the things that we're incorporating in the 8285 report that came out at the end of the summer. So, and we'll follow up with some questions and answers that you may have. So briefly, we actually initiated reviewing the 2017 CTP guidelines in August to identify any new legislation or federal requirements that came up. It is required to be updated every 5 years under SB 46. So we started that, and we also started working with our colleagues in regional planning to work together on updating both guidelines to make sure that they're consistent and to leverage the opportunity with all the partners and getting feedback. As Bridget mentioned, we announced the update officially in October, and we released the discussion draft in December, so just a few weeks ago. So today is our opportunity to work with everyone here to get feedback in the discussion draft that has been posted. As you can see in March, we are going to take any comments that we receive here today and put that as into our actual formal public comment or public comment draft in March, and to officially receive comments from the Commission at the March 27th, 23rd meeting. Public comment will close in April, and we'll take all the comments that we've received, review with our management, review with CTC staff, and bring it back to the Commission for approval in June. So it's a very straightforward timeline. We view the discussion draft as the sort of first public comment period, and then the formal comment period is the second opportunity to provide anything else we may have missed during today's workshop and the actual public comment period. We will have the CTP guidelines posted for 30 days beginning in March. So that's about it in terms of that. And just to let you know, we will be working with the RTP guidelines team on making sure that both the CTP guidelines and RTP guidelines are as consistent as possible as RTP continues to progress in its development. So for the guidelines update, the reason that we are updating the CTP guidelines is because under SB 46, the CTP guidelines has to be updated every 5 years and prior to the actual update of the California Transportation Plan. So we are required by law to update this every 5 years. And as I mentioned earlier, part of the update is to identify any new executive orders or directives, any new state or federal regulations. Some of the things that we have incorporated in this CTP guidelines are not necessarily brand new legislative mandates, but really kind of working through more of the Federal Clean Air Act compliance, bringing that to be more prominent in the CTP. A big change is that we are required to have an implementation plan, and so to kind of keep track of how the CTP is doing in terms of its progress and implementation, and also really look at the future mobility. So we had a future mobility report in the last CTP, but this is actually more integrated with the updates to future iterations of the CTP. In addition to that, we have some new resources and guidance. A lot has happened in the last 5 years.
You should be able to get it back. I assume we just lost audio online, so I think Francis, you can continue. Thank you.
So again, one of the other changes that we did was that we are trying to streamline the actual CTP guidelines and development processes in this iteration. So we are including a detailed incorporation of the draft modeling, a more sort of easy and digestible framework of the document, and additional implementation considerations. And I think that's what we're really looking forward to in these workshops is kind of strengthening the implementation component for the CTP and the RTP. And that goes into the 8285 report. That's actually one of the things, one of the recommendations that came out of there for both the CTP and RTP documents is to try to strengthen the implementation aspect to achieve our sort of statewide climate goals. In addition to that, we are incorporating some of the other key findings, particularly the gap analysis discussion, talking about the differences between what is proposed in a lot of the RTPs and what policies and recommendations we've set forth in the CTP 2050. And so the biggest sort of interest that we've received is the sort of fiscal analysis, the fiscally constraint. As you may have heard, we are a policy planning document, and so for the CTP itself, we are to stick to a long-range policy planning document that provides a 20 to 25-year horizon, and we are not to include a financially constrained project list in this. But that's not to say that we cannot work together to kind of find solutions to close those sort of gaps between the visionary document and more project-specific documents there. So those are the really big sort of things that have changed there. There are 3 required elements: a policy element, a strategies element, and a recommendation element. But we have a lot of study areas, so if there's something that during the development of the CTP guidelines that is not discussed or you feel needs to have more attention, you can let us know, and we're more than happy to discuss what we can include in the CTP guidelines and stuff. So, oops. We are now opening it up to questions.
Are there any questions or comments in the room? Oh yeah, go ahead. I like your phone, actually.
Hi, this is Heather Adamson with AMBEC. Just a clarifying question on the financial analysis. So I read in the actual discussion draft that the CTP will include a summary of what's needed in terms of funding to implement the program, the entire CTP, but will it also compare that to what is existing in the adopted RTPs? So to show the difference?
Yes, I think I think we've rolled up in the past all the RTP projects, and I think we're exploring how to kind of balance that with such a far projected sort of revenue, such far revenue projections, because there's a lot going on. We are looking at including the vehicle fleet mix too. The challenges that we have with the state highway account and gas tax measures. I think all of us in the room acknowledge that it's not a stable funding source long term, and so we are going to have that discussion too. Is how do we fund? What do we need to do, and how do we fund those projects? Because I think that is a really big point we've heard in 8285 and from the last update to the CTP. Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments online? All right. Thank you, Francis, for your presentation. So before I move on to the next item, I do want to do a quick audio check because I understand we've been getting some chats online. All right, I'm testing once again for the folks online. Can you let us know if you can hear me? Is it quiet or fuzzy?
Someone can use the mic.
Are these, it sounds a lot clearer. Is this mic clearer for the folks online?
Much.
Oh, terrific. Sorry that I didn't figure that out sooner. We can use the handheld microphones.
Sounds like the laptop. Audio.
Thanks everyone for your patience while we try to troubleshoot this.
Is that any better?
Is this better?
Did they quit picking up the mic from that?
Are you still hearing feedback when I'm talking?
Yes, yes. Yes.
Okay. That sounds like that was what she needed. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna just zoom ahead. I think originally we had thought about taking our lunch break before the next item, but we're running a little ahead of schedule. So for our next item, I'd like to introduce Erin Thompson, Office Chief for Regional and Community Planning at Caltrans, who will provide an overview of the technical work groups.
Okay, hopefully I'm still not echoing. Can you guys hear me okay? In the room, I know you can. Yes. But as Bridget said, I'm the office chief for regional and community planning, and we actually staff the RTP guidelines on behalf of the CTC. And we've been working diligently over the last year to build a baseline draft that we kicked off, like she said, in October. And then we have also had a kickoff meeting on February 9th that outlined the 6 working groups that are focus areas, and we have 6 leads that are focusing on each area. We had amazing attendance, so I want to thank everyone that participated. We had some people that attended all of them, and then those that focused on their areas that they wanted to attend. So the 6 areas are equity, engagement, and health, housing, climate change and environment, freight and economic development, transportation performance management, and modeling. Those are focus areas, but obviously we're looking at other areas of the document. So we appreciated everyone's comments. It was really just to provide an overview and get initial intake. We will be doing a formal comment period, but this was just the start of discussions. And then we are going to be revising the baseline draft for the formal draft that we will be releasing this spring. So I will hand it over. We don't have Bruce here. Oh, Abby? Okay. Abby's going to go first for housing. I co-lead with her, but she's going to give an overview of what was discussed at the work group. You want me to say it? Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Abby Jackson. I'm the Housing and Homelessness Solutions Lead at Caltrans, and I led the housing work group that we had on February 9th. We had a pretty good attendance, well-rounded group of people. There was some suggestions to try to get more disability advocates at the next work group meeting, but this is, so I'll give a quick overview of what we heard from the group and what we'd like to consider in the RTP update. So let's see. So one of the things that's new is the IIJA, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. They said that MPOs may do a housing coordination plan. This is a new thing, but in California, we already have the Sustainable Community Strategy. So we're going to look at which the new housing coordination plan shoulds are additive to what's already considered or reflected in the Sustainable Community Strategy guidance. And then the group would like to inform Chapter 2 draft language of the baseline draft of the RTP. So that's on the housing coordination plan. And then also take a look at Chapter 6, where addressing housing in the SCS is discussed. And the group, they thought housing plan with income, location, and all ages and abilities in mind is really important, but really what is challenging is the implementation of the planning, of the quality planning. So how can the group focus efforts to increase the implementation feasibility of housing in the RTP? So one member had an idea to come up with a couple implementation examples. And I guess this was done in the 2017 guidelines update. So this would be a resource ideally that wouldn't necessarily go in the RTP guidelines, but it would like be a supplemental thing. Yeah. So we'll be working with the group to also generate some ideas of like what is good implementation that we want to represent.
Yeah, so I definitely think that is something is like best practices, and we have had that in appendices before. It was mostly not with housing. This is the first time. We've always, like, the SCS obviously is tied to the RENA, but this is the first time in federal legislation and reauthorization that housing has been incorporated in two areas, like the housing coordination plan, but also housing has been incorporated into like a more collaborative process throughout the metropolitan planning. And so it's exciting for us because we've always done that in California, but it's also now federally encouraged. And so it's just something that we should really utilize, and it's something that we really hope the RTP guidelines reflect. Do you want to do questions?
Sure. I think we should pause for questions. So we can go ahead and just go back to the previous slide so that folks can sit with that language. I would also just like to reiterate something that Erin and Abby said, which is that we are taking what we hear at these work group meetings as well as in the workshop today. And that information will inform the first drafts of the RTP and CTP guidelines. So if you have any additional comments you would like to make based on your experience developing an RTP or your subject matter expertise, I would encourage you to share that today or to follow up via email with staff. So with kind of that overview, given what Abby has presented, are there any questions or comments in the room on the housing topic? Yeah, we have a microphone for you.
Hey, mine is just more of a request to pull federal highway and FTA in on that, because we will use this to justify eligibility for PL 5303, 5304, 5305, and SPR funds. So.
And that was Antonio from FHWA. All right, Heather, Myra.
Heather Adams, AMAC. I love Antonio's comment. I would love to charge my housing planning activities to PO. But
you have to make sure
they're eligible. It'll be interesting conversation. But my overall question is more of a process, and it's not just with the housing work group, but
the scheduling of the future subgroup meetings, I guess what time period are you looking to have that happen? Is it gonna be after you release the discussion draft, like through the summer? Or I'm just trying to, for staffing purposes and kind of planning things out, because there are a lot of them and some have now new subgroups of the subgroup. And so just wanted to just see the range of when you expect these groups to be meeting.
Yeah, we know that resource-wise, this is a lot, and it's a very quick time frame because the adoption date is obviously, we're anticipating for December 2023, and that means like we basically have to have it done by hopefully October. And so it is kind of like every working group is going to be very different. Some might have to only meet once and it's done. Some might have to meet more. We are trying to get comments by February 21st. Don't quote me on that. We'll like put a timeline, but I'm pretty sure it's February 21st. Is it? Yeah, but
We're getting confirmation of the audience.
yeah, thank you, Myra. And I want to thank the regional planning staff, Jennifer Duran and Myra Ramon, from Caltrans. They have been critically beautiful. Like, I would not be able to do this without that. But so we are like, that's just an anticipated date, and then we're going to continue to meet, and then May is when the official draft is going to be released. So we will be meeting kind of as needed. So there's not a set deadline for each working group, and that's where the leads are going to be really pulling the who's participating in the groups and who can attend. Great. If you can't, we'll do kind of offline meetings. We want to hear everyone's voice through this process. And just also like what Abby said, like that there's some groups that were identified that weren't participating. We want to know to encourage them to participate as well.
The path of the RTP guidelines that are being updated aren't necessarily the same as the CTP guidelines, right?
Yes.
So that's the discussion draft, and it's a little bit different for the RTP guidelines.
Yes. Yeah, they're on a much quicker path than us, but it's just like they participated in all of the work groups for the CTP, and then obviously today, which is great because they can get input and then we can also learn from it, so we know how to guide the RTP guidelines for CTP implementation.
Yeah, and just to flag that we have the timelines for both sets of guidelines towards the end of the presentation. So I know we've been saying some throwing out some dates, and we'll reiterate those before we wrap today. I do believe that we have some comments in the chat, and so I think I'm going to ask Cherry to read those out for the room.
We have a chat comment from Aaron Point, NCTC. The housing work group appears to be MPO specific. Has there been any discussion or thought on how this may filter down to the RTPA guidelines? How will the work groups inform the RTPA guidelines in general?
Oh, Aaron. Yes, so the RTPA guidelines are not going to have huge changes. It's basically just kind of updating it and formatting. These don't impact the RTPAs as much, although I know there are some RTPAs within MPO regions, and it's considerations, but it's not required of the RTPAs. The RTPA guidelines are not going to have significant changes. We will be meeting with the RTPAs obviously before we roll them out, but it'll be a separate process, and it's not going to be as massive of an update as the MPO guidelines.
We have another question in the chat from Jonathan Palacio. Hello, everyone. Jonathan here from District 7. Just a second. Jonathan here in District 7. Usually, zoning matters is not covered in Caltrans land use and planning documents. There has been discussion that the Biden administration will want zoning matters incorporated into IIJA funded projects. Can you please provide perspectives into this?
Yeah, I think obviously that has to do with the general plan and the RTP, and that's something like with project selection and how the RTP and the general plan should have alignment. That's been an issue that we've had for decades and that we're working on. We haven't come up with a solution, but that is something that we will be discussing through this process. So it's something that we will flag and that we've already been discussing.
We have Rob Ball from Current Cog. Specific comment on the housing section. Housing forecast requirement that the forecast be within 1.5% of the DOF should be set at the time that MPO finalizes and adopts the use of the forecast for that RTP cycle, so that if a subsequent DOF forecast comes out later, it does not require the MPO to redo all the modeling or make the housing estimates inconsistent with the RTP. Not sure if that's a question or a comment.
He's correct.
There are no further questions in the chat.
Okay, and like Bridget said, Abby and I are co-leading this, and so if there's any further comments, and Bridget will go over, we have an RTP guidelines inbox, and so we'll be working with the leads, and then answering it, and then obviously through our future work groups through this process. And like I said, we really appreciate the time and effort you guys put into making these really great guidelines. Luke, you're up.
Checking. Okay, this is on. Great. So my name is Lucas Sanchez, and I work at Caltrans in planning in the Office of Air Quality and Climate Change with Leah Fisher and Julia Bigger, I know, was online, and also Brendan Powell-Jones from DEA, who are helping me out with chapters 5 and 6 for our update areas for the RTP guidelines. So this work group, this is more of an administrative point for these chapters. This work group has been broken down into 3 sub-working groups, and those are the environmental considerations, which is currently chapter 5 in the guidelines, regional GHG emissions requirements and considerations, which are sections 6.23 through 6.28, and adaptation to climate change, which is section 6.29. Last week at the meeting, Myra sent out a Smartsheet link to sign up for those working groups in case any current members of this working group don't want to attend all 3, they can choose which ones they would like to attend, and we will be staggering those in the future so there's no overlap among those 3 sub-working groups. For climate adaptation, we will be focusing on updates to this sector since 2017, including any new policy and guidance that has come out since then, new funding programs, including the Federal Protect program out of Egypt, and best practices for integrated climate adaptation principles in the regional planning process. There will be no new requirements added in this section from a shall point of view. Also on adaptation planning, we did receive one question in the workshop last week regarding the Federal Protect program, and specifically the Resilience Improvement Plan within the Protect program. And on that point, we're looking forward to working with the adaptation sub-working group on the guidelines to ensure NPOs can incorporate the State Resilience Improvement Plan, which is currently in development in my office, into their RTPs to get the benefits thereof. Additionally, on climate adaptation, we will be highlighting the adaptation planning guide as a key resource for climate adaptation planning at the regional level in the RTPs. And lastly, on adaptation, we also just want to acknowledge strategy 5.3 in CAPTI, which is explore incentivizing land conservation through transportation programs. And that strategy directs the CTC to identify conservation and climate resilience strategies that could be integrated into the RTP guidelines. So we want to go and take advantage of this opportunity for this guideline updates this year. And so towards this end, we'll be evaluating the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy from the California Natural Resources Agency and any other related existing resources and concepts that are on this topic. So aside from adaptation, this work group covers regional GHG requirements as well. And these sections, will be updated to reflect the recently released 2022 scoping plan from CARB. We heard from participants last week that there is support for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and participants would like to see inclusion of CAPI specifically, and those components thereof as part of the RTP guidelines update, as well as VMT mitigation measures from CAPI and related policy documents. And then lastly, for environmental considerations more broadly, we will be updating to reflect changes in any laws and best practices since 2017. And from the work group last week, there was interest mentioned in the Clean Water Act specifically, in addition to the existing section on the Clean Air Act for this year's update. And I think that's all I have for talking points, and can open it up to any comments or questions online.
Thanks, Lucas. We can actually go in the room first and just see if there's any questions or comments in the room. If not, I wanted to just make a quick note before we go to the comments in the chat. Unfortunately, we are not able to use the raised hand feature at this time. We cannot hear that audio feed in the room. So what we're asking is, if you have a question or a comment, you can put it in the chat, and that way we can read it out for the folks who are here in the room. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Cherry for our online comments.
We have a comment from Naila Sharmi from Caltrans. Can you elaborate a little on Federal Protect Program? Sounds interesting.
Sure. The Federal Protect Program is one of the two new climate-centered programs under HEJA or bill as part of the federal aid programs. The other being the Carbon Reduction Program, where carbon reduction is focused on developing a carbon reduction strategy and more GHG reduction specific eligibility, whereas Protect is focused on climate adaptation and resilience and projects that are helping us safeguard our transportation system from current and future projected climate impacts and stressors. So that's like the general overview of Protect. And what I was mentioning about the Resilience Improvement Plan, it's an optional component of Protect to basically get a project investment list or plan that has undergone some sort of strategic analysis for risk assessment to climate stressors. So something like our existing vulnerability assessments at Caltrans or adaptation priority reports. And the benefit there is between the state side of the program and the discretionary side of the program for the NPOs, RTPAs, and locals. Each individual project can receive up to a 10% reduction in their cost share for developing that project.
I don't see any further questions in the chat.
All right, thanks so much for your presentation, Lucas.
Sure, thank you.
All right, so I think we jumped around a little bit on the work group order. So if it's all right with Bruce, I think we'll circle back to the equity work group. Bruce Kemp is the branch chief of the Equity Engagement and Health branch at Caltrans, and I look forward to his presentation.
Thank you. Maybe you guys have been back in in-person meetings, but this is just a novelty to me. It's like over 3 years since we've been doing this. So happy to be here in person to talk with you a little bit about the equity, engagement, and health work that we have been working on. So. Good morning. My name is Bruce Kemp. I'm Senior Transportation Planner at Caltrans, Division of Transportation Planning, where I serve as the branch chief for Equity, Engagement, and Health branch. The EEH branch, I may be using this acronym EEH, seeks to promote and embed equity, engagement, and public health values and actions in all the various functions in transportation planning at Caltrans. There are many people involved in equity, engagement, and health at Caltrans. We are specifically dedicated to transportation planning. The department, I'm going to give a little bit of a shout out here. The department is evolving in terms of equity, engagement, and health. When I started 10 years ago, it was a different department, and we are currently dedicated to implementing the policies and actions of the strategic plan and the climate action plan for transportation infrastructure, the department's and the agency's equity statements, and the department's other mandates that encourage us to promote, embed, and incentivize, normalize EEH values and actions. So I'm pleased to be here and co-leading the EEH work group is my colleague and staff member and co-lead, Carolyn Abrams. Carol's not here today, but she's, I think, online. She is the Priority Populations Program Manager in the Caltrans Division, Caltrans Director's Office of Equity, Sustainability, and Tribal Affairs. So Carolyn and I, along with other contributing staff from Caltrans and CTC, some of whom are here today, thanks. We have convened a meeting of 6 working groups, and Carolyn and I were pleased to lead the working group for equity, engagement, and health this Thursday. I want to talk to you a little bit about the review process we went through and some of the takeaways, high-level items that came out of that meeting. So our review process for the 2017 RTP guidelines has been looking through the lens of equity, engagement, and health, looking at the general narratives, some specific sections, and other possible additional opportunities to make meaningful comments and help engage, help shape the. Thank you. So we're doing review and accommodation. We're just getting started, and my job today is to talk to you about some of the highlights so far that we have identified for equity, engagement, and health. First, I'll talk about some of the sections in the baseline 2017 draft that we're looking at. Our mission is to update and refresh the 2017 language to promote public health and equity and federal requirements. We're looking at some specific sections having to do with Title VI and EJ considerations, environmental justice considerations. We're looking at social equity factors, Native American tribal government considerations, consultation, and coordination. Looking at sustainable community strategies, and looking at Appendix K, which seems like to me an opportunity to add new best practices to promote health and health equity in MPO RTPs. All of this really is an opportunity to add new language, refresh the old language, but particularly in Appendix K, you have an opportunity to add new best practices that have emerged since 2017. Thank you. I don't have many slides today. We're just talking about what we've been reviewing. And again, we're just really getting started on this, but there's a lot of things to look at there. And there are other things. Pardon me. So there's some additional focus areas having to do with public health and transportation, consistency with other planning documents, and so looking at places where we can improve upon and update and refresh the language in the 2017 version as now reflected in the baseline version of the RTP guidelines. And one area is Appendix J, for example, the glossary even, maybe an opportunity to add new words such as social equity, environmental justice, things like that. So moving on now to the takeaways from our initial meeting last Thursday. Let me back up here. Just do that. Let's start again. Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So we have a few takeaways for you, just for your consideration. Some of them things we heard, we've rolled up into some main ideas, themes, takeaways. And the first one here is to strengthen equitable public engagement, guidance and practices. And this is probably the top, most important topic that we heard people talking about. Removing the barriers to community participation. This is always very important. We need to do more in providing incentives for people to participate and removing the barriers to let them get there. Again, I go back to my initial comment about appearing in person. This kind of hybrid idea may be prudent to allow more people to attend more easily. We also want to promote tribal consultation and inclusion in statewide transportation planning, programming, and delivery. We are doing this, but we need to go beyond the minimum requirements and do more, do it better. We also want to embed social equity principles throughout the guidelines, and we want to address the disproportionate environmental effects. I think you heard a little bit about this from Lucas. We would agree with that. We heard, I think, probably some of the same speakers in the working group on EEH. And air quality has been something that the department's worked on fastidiously for many years. Water quality also, and these are some of the environmental effects that may be felt disproportionately by equity priority communities. We also want to make active transportation and public transit more accessible. And we are seeking fair distribution of funding for historically under-resourced communities. And all of these roll up into some of the main topics we heard having to do with social equity. Again, I'll mention Appendix K. This came out of the last, for the first time appeared in the last 2017 guidelines from an Assembly Bill 441, and we would like to see if we can add more best practices to promote health and health equities in LPO RTP. So that really is a quick overview of where we are. The work group will continue. We are going to have additional meetings to correspond to the draft work on the RTP guidelines. And again, overall, our goal is to add value in the areas of E, E, and H by refreshing and updating the language, adding new requirements without add new ideas without additional requirements that are not based in statute or regulation. So I'm going to stop there, turn it back to you for questions and discussion.
Great, thank you, Bruce. Do we have any questions or comments in the room for Bruce? Yeah.
So I know when COVID hit, we started working more towards the virtual setting of public involvement. But I know a lot of the MPOs didn't have public involvement plans that included virtual settings. As I guess we move forward to update this, or is there some type of consideration to provide some guidance for those MPOs, those federally mandated agencies, to incorporate some virtual public engagement into their public involvement plan?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it's very important. I think it's also supported by the Infrastructure Act. EJA has a specific section that we're going to highlight to do with the use of technology to improve public engagement. And we are certainly going to highlight that in the upcoming update of the RTP guidelines. We will suggest what methods to do this. Again, the idea is to make sure that anything that we suggest is based on a statute provision or guidance, but in that area, we're pretty safe to use each provision for electronic use of technology for better improved public engagement. So yes, I think that's an important area. Thanks.
And good to see you, Bruce.
Been a while, like 3 years.
Great. So I think we'll go now to questions that we're getting online.
No, I actually don't see any questions regarding this presentation specifically. We do have a question turning back to the climate change topic, however. Should we allow for more time on this? Okay, looks like we have a question or comment from Rob Ball from Kerncog. In the environmental and sustainable communities section discussed previously, add a provision for highway freight capacity projects to be considered as an alternative mode, much like HOV lanes are for passenger vehicles. For example, truck climbing lanes, freight lanes, business access and travel truck, BATT lanes, and free flow lanes on spoke corridors to intermodal rail hubs should be expressly exempt from consideration as adding capacity or SOE travel and associated BMT increases. That was going back to the climate change topic.
That sounds like a comment and duly noted. Thank you.
There is a question from Kira Smith. Are there any plans to clarify disadvantaged communities definitions or better align those with federal definitions?
That's a good question. We're working on that. I think the idea is to come up with a definition that we all can use. They may vary. We are turning to the idea of equity priority communities as being our definition, our use, our standard language. But that's what the federal government is also asking us to do, and we will follow their lead in that matter. So standard definition is certainly something we will take under consideration and continue to work on.
And we have a climate comment from Carrie Nett from CARB. Comment on the climate work group. CARB wants to thank staff for all the work underway on this and express our enthusiasm for participating. Under SB 375, CARB must review sustainable community strategies, greenhouse gas emission reduction determinations, as well as the supporting technical methodology. Our evaluation reports also identify risks to the efficient implementation of the plans. The work you are discussing today is more important than ever as CARB's SB 150 progress report shows that California is not on track to meet the greenhouse gas reductions expected under SB 375, and that vehicle miles traveled is increasing. This draft report identifies numerous other gaps between what RTPs have planned and forecasted and the results occurring on the ground. The RTP guidelines play a crucial role for the state in guiding RTP planning and modeling to provide a uniform transportation planning framework that promotes comprehensive transportation planning that meaningfully includes stakeholders and sets the stage for efficient implementation. Having reviewed SCSs for over a decade, CARB staff has identified opportunities to strengthen the guidelines so that it can better serve its role. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to engage in this process and look forward to working with you all, working with all of you.
Thanks, Jay. We look forward to working with you again as well.
And I don't see any other comments in the chat.
All right, thank you both. Okay, so we can go ahead and move to our next work group update. So I would like to invite up Tracy Frost. the Strategic Freight Planning Lead at Caltrans to talk about the Freight and Economic Development Work Group.
Thank you, Bridget. Good morning. My name is Tracy Frost, and I am with the Strategic Freight Office. Glad to be with you. We have two different sections in the RTP, sections 4.5, which is the private sector involvement, and section 6.12, which is the goods movement section. We had a lot of good discussion in both of these topics in the work group last week, and these are high-level takeaways from our meeting. And we'll start with the first section, section 4.5. And this is private sector involvement, which relates to how the goods movement industry and other business or commercial interests are represented in the development of the RTP. It's very important. And in this section, I think just to kind of summarize a little bit, there's a lot of really good details on the modes, but what was recommended is to add language to strengthen who makes up the private sector and the importance of engaging them. And maybe I can just stop there, or I can continue on, but to see if there's any questions. But that's kind of the main takeaway for this particular section. Maybe I'll just go on. Okay. So the next one is 6.12, which is the actual goods movement section. And there's a lot of good details that were discussed in this section. It does provide about 13 different ideas on goods movement to go over. And a lot of it was really strengthening the narrative, especially incorporating travel time reliability, which is tied to PM3. There was also lots of really good suggestions on strengthening the climate resilience, a lot of details on what could be discussed, and as well as impacts on freight projects that have on communities. And then there's just some, this is a, take out the reference to reauthorization because they talked about the FAST Act and just really just keep the US code, and that would be a lot easier for updates. So that's a little takeaway there. So yeah, we could go forward and see if there's any questions in the room. Or Bridget, take it away.
This is your last slide, right, Tracy?
Yeah, there was just
perfect. So, are there any questions or comments in the room for Tracy? If not, are there any online?
I don't see any comments at the moment. Let's give it a second. Looks like we don't have any chat comments.
Right.
We do have one, Elizabeth Hans, she has a comment.
And she might be typing, but Elizabeth, just a reminder that you'll need to type your comment into the chat so that we can read it out for the room, and we'll pause for a sec to give you a chance to write it.
It looks like Elizabeth was asking about the presentation and recording it with improved audio and upload it for future reference. Elizabeth, we are currently recording the presentation. We'll try to work with the audio and kind of maximize the audio after it's processed.
I have maybe an idea about that as well. We can regroup and think about, for the folks online who have been having a hard time hearing, how to handle that. One thing that we can provide is some office hours from our work group leads we can coordinate with Caltrans staff to do that. That might be an even better way to engage with that subject matter material in a timely manner. So we'll send a follow-up email out to the folks who are on the webinar today to let them know the best way that they can be more involved. And again, I want to apologize for the audio. It's always a bit of a risk to try a new venue in a room. It's a really nice experience, and we're just working on the online experience for next time. With that, okay, we have another question or comment.
So this is specific to the free topic from Elizabeth Hahn. We understand the importance of private sector engagement, but are having difficulty in successful outreach. I suggest providing case studies or methods to go beyond just statements that it is important, or provide tools for identifying stakeholders in freight and other industries.
Thank you.
All right, I think that's it. Thank you, Tracy. All right, I think we can go ahead and keep moving. Oh, we have another comment. Is it online? Sorry.
Yes.
Yes, we have a chat comment from Jonathan Palacio. Hello, Jonathan, here in Caltrans District 7. Just a comment that Section 4.5, private sector involvement, is critical in helping to create solid planning documents. This section is very innovative for planning.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Okay, thanks for flagging me down on that. So I think we can keep going. So we'll move to our next work group on transportation performance management. And I would like to introduce Brian Greenway, Assistant Federal Liaison.
Thanks, Brenda. Hello, everyone. Thank you. I just want to thank the participants at our first initial workshop. I think it went very well. We had a lot of great feedback. We had over 49 participants contributing to the discussion on updating the transportation performance management section in Chapter 7. I'll just highlight some kind of notable feedback that we heard from our stakeholders. This included making the sections, chapters more user-friendly, as in call out requirements, dates, maybe include a calendar, key requirements, links, etc. Also, looking at adding more current examples and best practices using performance monitoring indicators. We also heard about that California really needs to strengthen our relationship between the RTPs and the TPM outcomes, including guidance that should include a requirement to demonstrate that the proposed RTP will make progress in the future. And then, in addition, strengthen the language for performance-based plans. So that's kind of the just feedback that we received. And then areas that we'll look to explore. Most of the section will need to be updated, some more than others. The big areas will be the section 7.1, as well as 7.2 and 7.4. And then we'll continue to consider these comments edits in the context of state and federal requirements. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
In the 2017 version, federal perspective is that it was very light on the roles and responsibilities of specifically the metropolitan planning organizations and the role that they play in TPM. And so I guess my recommendation would be to kind of provide some additional language in that area. And then the second thing is, and this is just a reminder, since 2017, there have been 2 documents that have been created. in coordination with Caltrans and the NPOs on how to better document the progress they're making towards TPM in their long-range plans or RTPs and their FSTIPs. I would encourage, I guess, the body to, if possible, integrate that into some of the guidance as well. That way, the information that was provided by federal finance and programming folks and the Office of Regional Planning is also kept in that centralized location for your metropolitan planning organizations to see and use.
Thank you for that comment. I think those are aligned with what we're thinking, so I really appreciate it. We'll work with our partners as well as the federal administration on that. So thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised in the room. Do we have any comments in the chat?
Oh, we have a comment from Rob Ball, current COG, on the TPM section, providing greater allowance for MPOs to substitute PM methods for similar PMs that are already available, as long as they provide an opportunity for historical tracking.
Thank you, Rob.
All right, I believe that's all we have for questions and comments, so thank you, Ryan.
Okay. Thank you.
And I believe we have one work group remaining. So I'd like to invite up Scott Sauer to talk about the modeling work group. Scott is the office chief for the Data Analytics and Services Office of Caltrans.
Hello, again, Scott Sauer, Office Chief for Modeling, Analytics Services, sorry, new office, getting used to the names. The modeling chapter, actually, I was initially trying to figure out why chapter 3 was the last chapter to be talked about, but after hearing all of this, I can see why. We're really, as you know, model, we're supposed to be analyzing all the different policies and all the issues that come out. So I like the lead in with all the different things that we're covering. I think when you hear our notes here, one of the key things are assumptions and how those assumptions are being analyzed in the modeling and other tools. And obviously, that has to be reflected correctly when we look at projection, what's going on. Just a quick overview of kind of what the chapter does include, and my notes here. Explanations on, basically, it provides NPOs clear and relevant travel demand model development direction for supporting RTP analysis, determine federal air quality conformity, and Senate Bill 375 Sustainable Community Strategy Development. So it talks a lot about, we have one section on explanation of the purpose and value of the models, the different policy tools, identifies federal and state legislation and laws that MPOs and RTPs must address, developing the RTPs, need for regional travel demand model consistency and quality. It talks a lot about the different data and sensitivity and all of that. Includes planning practice examples and tools for different situations and circumstances. And then, of course, there's a map at the very end. It provides, identifies different travel analysis groups for MPOs, RTPAs, and congestion management agencies. And the chapter basically identifies the different groups and different levels and requirements for each of those. One of the issues that came up in our working group, and it's already talked about a little bit, was N7920, I think it was zero emission targets for 2035 and 2045. And that was one of the topics here. Kind of going a little bit out of order here, but the second bullet here, obviously those are our targets. And so we want to make sure the assumptions are correct in the model. And I think that was kind of the big focus. Are we going to meet those targets? There's some debate on it, we are or aren't, depending on current trends. And really, if we do or don't, it's kind of a policy decision. And so other areas kind of talk about the policy we want to accurately reflect it. So that was a key discussion point. Another point was greenhouse gas reduction targets. There was a little discussion on, are we just looking at transportation, or we're looking at all sources? Are we separating those? And so we went a pretty good discussion on that. We'll continue that discussion. Obviously, and this is mentioned before in the assumptions,
There's a lot of new technologies. There's emerging electric vehicles, emerging technologies, things like that. We want to make sure that those assumptions are as accurate as possible. This is going to probably be something that continually evolves over time. This California Statewide Freight Forecasting Travel Demand Model and the MFAC system are two key elements of that. And of course, I think this one, the last bullet, is going to be something we started with, and we're going to continue talking about this. What are the potential tools to consider adding to the list of planning practice examples? Obviously in the RTP guidelines, but also our office will look at things that maybe don't fit in the RTP guidelines, but other agencies need, or others, the districts need, our headquarters needs. So we'll be working on not only training and tools on that. So whatever product will either kind of incorporate in the RTP guidelines, or we'll figure ways to also address it elsewhere. That's just an overview of what we have. Any questions?
I'm not seeing any hands raised in the room. I'll go to the chat.
I don't see any chat comments at the moment. Let's give it a second.
And just so you know, the modeling chapter is very detailed. So it's hard to give us a quick commentary. So we would love any and all edits, any comments at all, please send those to us.
We do have one from Nasami. Everybody in the room. Nasami Kalandir. Let's take a look here. The travel demand modeling tools and assumptions are critical for developing the sustainable community strategy and demonstrating the GHG emission reduction targets under SB 375 program. Currently, MPOs use the requirements and recommendations specified in the RTP guidelines for developing and maintaining travel demand models. Under SB 375 statute, CARB must review MPO's technical methodology for forecasting GHG emission reductions for 2020 and 2035. CARB would like to suggest improving the current modeling techniques and practices based on the information and insights gained over the years of reviewing SCSs. This would include developing a consistent methodology for critical input variables such as auto operating costs, socioeconomic forecasts, and network characteristics. In addition, we suggest an expanded discussion of model validation, calibration criteria, and thresholds. Some key topics that we'd like to discuss are interregional trip estimates, induced demand effects of land use and transportation projects, telecommuting and new mobility, and automated vehicles. Finally, we recommend providing guidance for checking the reasonableness of model outputs. Thanks to Scott Sauer and his team's leadership in organizing this working group.
Thank you, Nasima. I appreciate that. We've already started discussing with them on that, and so we'll continue those discussions. So thanks.
Okay, and I think that concludes our comments for this work group. Thanks, Scott. So I'm looking at our agenda, and we are running, I thought we might be running a little ahead of schedule. We are running very ahead of schedule. And so what I'm going to propose is that instead of doing a lunch break, we finish out our last remaining item here so that we can turn you all loose to lunch and you'll be done with the workshop. And I'll pause to see if there's any concerns, but okay, I think we're going to do that as a plan. So, and let me advance the slides here. So I just wanted to provide a summary to wrap up today's workshop and talk about next steps. I would like to thank our work group leads for facilitating discussions last week as well as today. And I also would like to thank everyone who has participated in today's workshop. We have note takers and we are capturing all of the feedback that you've made in the room and on the web. And we'll be regrouping after the workshop to brainstorm how we can incorporate what we've heard into the draft guidelines, as well as how we can provide additional outreach touch points to those who joined us via the web who had a difficult time hearing today. So I wanted to wrap up and go over the timelines for both the CTP guidelines and the RTP guidelines. So for the CTP guidelines, our next critical milestone is to release an updated draft of the CTP guidelines to present at our March commission meeting, which will be March 22nd and 23rd. With that, we will initiate a formal public comment period, and we look forward to any feedback we receive. And just as a reminder, we've mentioned it a couple of times today, there is a discussion draft out, which includes some initial language edits. And so you are welcome to start reviewing that as soon as today. It's on the CTC's website. If you have a hard time finding it, we have our staff contact information at the end of the PowerPoint presentation. And then we are aiming to have our commission adopt the CTP guidelines at the June commission meeting. For the RTP guidelines, it is a bit of a longer process. As you may know, it's a much longer document. And so we'll be releasing the first draft of the RTP guidelines for public review in the spring. We're targeting the May commission meeting. And once that draft has been released, we'll hold another public workshop similar to this to get your reflections on the first public draft. And we'll be doing two drafts and 2 public comment periods for the RTP guidelines and aiming to recommend those for adoption to the commission at our December meeting. If you like what you've heard and would like to get even more involved, there are several ways to do so. If you are not already participating on the technical work groups, we encourage individuals to join those at any time. I'm not sure if our slides are hyperlinked, but they will be posted, so you should be able to copy the web link here. You can also search Caltrans 2023 RTP guidelines for a way to sign up for the work groups. As I mentioned, the CTP guidelines discussion draft is out. We've included the web link here. I've included the emails for our staff teams for RTP guidelines and CTP guidelines. Those are reviewed by both our Caltrans and commission staff. We would be happy to set up a meeting with anyone who would like to talk about the guidelines. And then, as I mentioned, our March commission meeting will have an update on both guidelines, primarily focused on the CTP guidelines. That will be in person in LA, as well as via webinar, and we archive our commission meetings on YouTube. So I have our contact information up. I do want to pause to see if there are any final comments in the room or online. Yeah, go ahead, Heather. Oh, thank you.
In what format do you want, like if we do review the discussion draft of the CTP that's out now, in what format do you want us to send you comments or additional suggested edits? Email, letter, online?
It's what is easiest for you.
Comments on the PDF.
Exactly. So it's a PDF document, so you can use the PDF comment feature and email that to us, or you can write your comments via email. That's probably the best way. Yeah, thanks for that question. Are there any questions on the web or comments?
There was one, as you were kind of closing, from Sam Sanford, Sandag. This is a general update question rather than a question of the specific working groups. Since 2017, Caltrans and USDOT have refocused significantly on traffic safety. Will the MPO and RTPA guidelines include a new or expanded section on how these agencies should incorporate safety in long-range planning? And I believe somebody,
Yeah, we responded. Yeah, it's already a section in the RTP guidelines. It's 6.20 traffic transportation safety. So yes, that will be reevaluated, knowing that safety is a huge and critical part. It's also PM1. So those are two areas that we will be looking at, and any comments would be great to get input from others as well. And obviously, we look at statute, but then also what we should be doing to enhance what we need to do for the state as well. And also, sorry, this is Erin Thompson from Regional Planning. Just to know, because Heather brought up how to comment on the CTP, the RTP guidelines, if you go to our website, there's a comment form that you can submit, and that is on our website.
Thank you, Erin. That's it. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close out the webinar momentarily, and then for folks in the room, I'm going to display a handy map that we have with lunch spots. A lot has changed if you haven't been in downtown Sacramento in a while. Anyway, I would like to go ahead and close out the webinar. So thank you again for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you. I know. Then you have. I still probably we're